afternoon, Clackamas County. Here we are on June 12th, Wednesday, June 12th, at our policy session. We have 4 of the county. Oh, Mike. Let me start over because my mic was not on. I got the flashlight. So, good afternoon, Clackamas County. We are here for our June 12th, Wednesday, June 12th policy session. And we're going to be discussing some big issues here for the county. And Nancy Bush, what do we have?
Okay, thank you. So just want to make a note that all commissioners are here today except for Chair Smith, and she is out. So our first policy session is the administrative warrants and other amendments to Chapter 7.01, vehicle parking and towing, and Chapter 2.07, compliance hearings officer. And today we have Scott Seco with County Counsel and Jesse Asby, the Undersheriff, to give the presentation.
All right.
Take it over.
Thank you, Nancy. Good afternoon, commissioners. As Nancy already indicated, we're here to talk about some changes to Chapter 7.01 and Chapter 2.07. Primarily what we're here to talk about is administrative warrants. And within that, even more specifically, we're here to talk about warrants to help us deal with the issue of occupied RVs within public right-of-way. That's really kind of what I would expect to be the focus of today's meeting. Of course, if commissioners want to take it a different direction to talk about some of the other things that are being changed, we can certainly do that. This issue that we're here to discuss is kind of wide-reaching within the county, and I say that in that it affects a lot of different departments. So in addition to Under Sheriff Ashby and myself, we have representatives from the DA's office. In fact, we have DA Wentworth here. We have Vahid Brown from H3S in the audience. We have Dan Johnson from DTD. Bill Stewart, also from the DA's office, is here to support what we're proposing. And all of these folks are integral in dealing with this problem because, again, it impacts different county departments and it requires cooperation of all those departments. I want to also be clear as to what we're talking about. We're talking about today occupied RVs in public right-of-way. So this is different. I know there was meetings about RVs on private property, residential property, things like that. Today's policy session does not overlap with that, at least to my knowledge from my perspective. Also, we're not talking about abandoned RVs. These are RVs that are just left, dumped. Sometimes they're burned, but they're abandoned in the public right-of-way. Those we don't have any issues with. Those can just be towed because they're abandoned. Of course, there's issues about who pays for that and where we get the money to pay for it, but again, not what we're here to talk about today. So again, this is just occupied RVs. And the reason that we're here is because this issue, I mean, obviously it's at the forefront of a lot of resident concerns. It has a lot of impacts throughout the community. My involvement with this, just quickly historically for context, is that I've been involved with the Neighborhood Livability Project, as has Bill Stewart. We try to improve livability issues within communities. We were originally dealing with a lot of private properties, kind of rundown, dilapidated houses. We've since kind of expanded that because we realized that community impacts can occur not just from private property, but also from activities that occur within the public right-of-way. So we've kind of shifted our focus to that, and as we've been trying to come up with creative solutions to deal with some of these things happening on public property, we've kind of run into a roadblock, and we seem to be lacking one tool, and that is dealing with RVs that are being lived in on public right-of-way. And it really boils down to the most simple way to describe it is when these vehicles are parked illegally, we already have the legal authority to tow them. However, there's a practical problem, and that is you can't tow a vehicle with someone inside of it. And so then the question becomes, how do we get the person out? And in order to enter somebody's vehicle, the legal way, the safest way to do it legally is to obtain a warrant. And so that's what we're asking for authority to do. It's not a criminal warrant because these individuals are not necessarily committing a crime punishable by imprisonment. There could be crimes associated. There's occasionally there are, but for the most part, what we're talking about is violation of county ordinances or parking ordinance, civil ordinances, things of that nature. But we still need a warrant to remove the person. And so that's what we're asking for. We have been we've met with presiding Judge Wetzel and talked about this. We've explained the scenario. We've briefed him. He's talked to other judges and has indicated that they will evaluate these and process these in the normal course, much as they do criminal warrants. So they are ready to move forward if this board authorizes it. And ultimately, without this tool, we're just kind of stuck. And we have certain places right now, Clackamas Way, where it's just kind of accumulating RVs and campers. And there's plenty of photos. It's been an ongoing issue. And I think you may have heard something about this previously. But we're at a point where the waste, the trash, the needles, there's been crimes associated with these places. There was a stabbing at one of these locations a couple years ago. You know, we need to be creative about ways to deal with this, and that's what we're trying to do. Procedurally, the changes are before you in the exhibits, but the administrative warrants obviously require the sheriff's office to fill out an affidavit to go into court and present that to a judge. For a criminal warrant, it would just be an affidavit of probable cause as to what crimes have been committed. We've added, in order to create some safeguards to make sure that this is kind of a tool of last resort that we're using. This is not going to be a first option if we just see a dilapidated RV parked on the side of the road. But to kind of ensure that, we're requiring, as proposed in the code, that the deputy applying for the warrant not just set forth the legal basis that authorizes the tow, but also describe the health, life, and safety impacts that are being caused by the vehicle. For example, if there was excessive trash, if there was human waste, needles, things of that nature that were associated with the vehicle, that would be described. We're also requiring that the affidavit describe the prior efforts to achieve voluntary compliance. In other words, this is not going to be, again, just a first knock on the trailer is, hey, surprise, we've got a warrant, you've got to get out of here. There's going to be prior efforts to try to persuade people to voluntarily move. And then also in the affidavit will need to be described the prior efforts to provide social services to these individuals. So again, we're going to make our best faith, good faith effort to get these people all the tools that they need to find alternate housing, alternate services. Bill Stewart with the DA's office has done a great job of working with community partners, Love One, Father's Heart. They're out there talking to these folks. We're going to continue to work with them, again, giving these folks every opportunity before this warrant is sought. Ultimately, then, a judge signing the warrant would basically be making a finding that all these things are met and that under the totality of the circumstances that removing the occupant and towing the RV is reasonable. And so that's kind of what we're looking at in a nutshell. Chapter 701 is administered by the sheriff's office, so they will have the responsibility of obtaining the warrants, and then once that's obtained, they will also be the kind of boots on the ground out there removing folks from the RVs and ordering the tows. So I'm sure Under Sheriff Ashby can answer any questions you have about that. The last two things that I'll point out are that this is, to be clear, this is an evolving area of law. As you all probably know, the U.S. Supreme Court is currently considering a case out of Grants Pass. Things are changing rapidly. There's a lot of uncertainty here. So this is a new, innovative tool that we're suggesting to the board, and I just want to be very clear about that. It would not be surprising at all if we were challenged on this, if we got pushback at some point. But again, it's a balancing of what we're going to do to address the problem, and of course this is the policy decision for the board to make, whether we want to try to address the problem through this tool, or if that's not an acceptable risk to take, then so be it, but this is what we're proposing. And then the last thing I'd like to point out is that, just quickly touch on the other changes that we're proposing, which are, number one, we're proposing to expand administrative warrants. Already in 2.07 right now, there's administrative warrants for code violations. That's the Code Compliance Hearings Officer chapter, and already county staff is authorized to seek administrative warrants for certain code violations. It's limited right now to chronic nuisance and marijuana grow operations, marijuana production operations. We're proposing at this point to expand that to all code violations, just because, again, this is a tool, whether it's If there's health, life, safety concerns, the proposal is to expand that, because why limit it to just marijuana and chronic nuisance? And then the other change that we are also proposing, now going back to the vehicle parking and towing section, is just a very minor update to the vehicle inventory policy. And I'll just touch on this, I can answer any questions, but currently any vehicle that's towed is required by state law that the sheriff's office inventory the contents, basically make a list of what's in the vehicle. When we're dealing with RVs, obviously we're gonna be talking about a lot more property, and to inventory and identify every single item in an RV is going to be potentially an impossible task. So the ask here is just to clarify that what we're going to be inventorying, what the sheriff's office is going to be inventorying is essentially valuables and things, weapons, any contraband, any evidence, but not every single item necessarily located within the RV.
Scott, thank you. Bunch of questions. And then under Sheriff Ashby, I think we'll have some questions about how this impacts direct law enforcement too in your arena. I just want to take a second and recognize that the elected DA, John Wentworth, is in the audience today. And so is with his office, Bill Stewart, and really even interested in what your guys' perspectives are. I guess, like many people in Clackamas County, my tolerance for all this is just really run out, and it's just thin. Just the illegal camping and the impact to health and safety and livability of our communities. Massive amounts of effort and resources have been given to try to provide all of these people resources that we know are chronically subsisting on our streets this way. Often at this point, many of those efforts are rebuffed and not accepted, and they continue to participate in that kind of criminal behavior on our roadways by living in their RVs. You touched on this, and big question that I have is, we know out of Grants Pass, this is now before this, they've already heard the oral arguments on the Grants Pass case. It's not always smart to read the tea leaves of the United States Supreme Court, but many experts believe that that law will be actually overturned, and we'll see more local control come back to local communities. I guess as we look at also Boise and special interest groups and state law and all these other players in this, what kind of risk is the county potentially at? Where does this effort fall into it? And so even though it's not technically criminal, and am I correct, criminal means in jail longer than 1 year, then it's criminal, is that right?
Generally, a criminal offense would be one that has the possibility of jail time, is my understanding of it.
Okay, so we have these individuals. They may be, I don't know how this impacts the ability to prosecute, or what this looks like with law enforcement directly on the ground and how this is implemented and what that picture looks like. Under Sheriff Ashby, I hope that you can shed light on that. But I'm also just concerned about where we're at legally as a county. I know we have county council here too. So I guess that's kind of my big picture question right out the gate is, how do all of us as players involved in this, from the DA's office to the sheriff's office to the Board of County Commissioners, where do we all intersect with this? And then what is the risk legally right now? What does the landscape in our best judgment look like?
All right, so big question there, and I'll do my best to address it. I think, this is kind of a parallel type process to what's happening with the U.S. Supreme Court case and the Grants Pass case. Also the Martin v. Boise case. Those are cases that deal with ordinances that prohibit camping or that limit the ability to camp in public property. And that's what's really being scrutinized right now by the Supreme Court. And this is why I say it's parallel, is because it's related, but it's a little different. We're not talking about outlawing or prohibiting camping in any widespread manner. What we're talking about is targeting specific locations or specific vehicles that are creating such an impact on the community that they need to be dealt with. And based on just speaking from my own personal research and my own personal review, I think that we do have more latitude there. There is still state law that allows posting and cleanup of homeless camps. And so again, we're not prohibiting the act, but there is, under our police power, we do have the ability, when we have a certain issue that is having adverse effects on the community to put a stop to that. And that's what we're focusing on, and would rely on that in defending this, is that we're targeting these specific sites when the problems that are being caused kind of outweigh the right of a person to stay in a specific place.
So you don't think that this effort runs afoul with current law that we face, like with Martin v. Boise or with the Grants Pass case? You think that could work in spite of those efforts?
I think it can work in spite of those cases. And I don't necessarily want to get too into it at a public policy session. There could be some other things, some other creative arguments that I expect some of the advocates for these groups could raise. There isn't Oregon case law necessarily on it, but there are some other jurisdictions where things have been challenged. Again, we've designed this in a way to try to minimize all of the exposure based on cases that have been decided so far. But because Oregon itself doesn't have a case on point, I mean, I can't sit up here and tell you that it's a slam dunk or a surefire thing.
Under Sheriff Ashby, do you have anything to add to this?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. I think what I kind of want to start with by saying is obviously I can't speak to the legalities. I'm not a lawyer, but I think when we crafted this, our thoughts, we had a couple people in mind. Number one, the folks that are being affected, the people that are living in the car, but also the folks whose neighborhoods are kind of are living through this. I know the commissioners take lots of phone calls. The sheriff's office takes lots of phone calls from residents and taxpayers and people in the communities that are frustrated and tired. And I know our deputies do a great job. They've come a long way. When I was a baby cop a long, long time ago, the response that you would have gotten out of a police officer then versus what you get now is a completely different response. And so I kind of want to assure the commissioners that that's who you're sending out there. You're sending out really professional men and women who care about people. And so and we don't always want to be the bad guy, as the police. And so you see that in our deputies' responses, and we care, and so this is crafted in a way where we're going out there and we're trying to solve to the best that we can as cops, solve everyone's problems, right? And that sometimes is difficult. But this is crafted in a way where we're trying to be thoughtful of both the neighbors but the people in the cars. And we don't want this to be the first option, and it's not going to be the first option. And we're going to make sure that people have plenty of opportunities to get the services that they need, so we're not just leaving them high and dry on the side of the road or just moving them along, because that's not what our intent is at all. But we get to the point, if I'm just going to be blunt, is you have deputy sheriffs that go out time and time and time again to these RVs, and a Love One has been great. It's a great partnership with the sheriff's office, and they will come out and they will offer services. And at some point, the guy can only shut the door on you 12 times and tell you, I'm not going anywhere. And now you're kind of in a standoff, if I'm just being honest with you. And I guess you guys are going to decide if there's a way to break that standoff. And so that's kind of what I wanted to share with you all. Of course, I'll answer any questions operationally, but that's kind of how I view where we find ourselves today.
So the last part of my question, and then I'll pass it on because other commissioners want to have a chance to opine. What does it look like in practice? So we have the RV there. You've gone there 12 times. We now have this warrant process that we're bringing forth, which sounds like is a little bit bold and innovative compared to what other local governments are ready to do or comfortable doing at this point. So we're a little bit of the spearhead on this, it sounds like. What does that look like? When do they intersect with you? How do they intersect with you? And then how do they get to, when is John Wentworth's office involved? We're passing a policy potentially today, or looking at passing a policy. I don't understand the time frame, how this intersects with deflection and all of that other stuff that we're doing. And I don't know who can answer that, but I think it's important to understand, okay, cool, they've already had been told 12 times. There's another 90 days of going through the process before we actually tow their vehicle. I know it's not overnight. I'm just curious about, in practice, for our community members, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I think, I'm shooting a little bit from the hip, but kind of just as the way operations work at the sheriff's office. I don't know that there's a magic number. Maybe the attorneys will give us a magic number if you guys grant this authority. But I think what it gets down to is there's a room of people smarter than me in a room that have figured out, hey, we can go and straight-faced look at a judge and tell them in the eyes, we've done our best. We've done our very best to be reasonable, whatever reasonable is per the circumstances. And then, I think once, if you authorize this and we were to get an administrative warrant, what it looks like on the ground. Obviously the sheriff's office would go out, we would execute that warrant. I'm hesitant in a public policy to talk about too much tactics, but I'm happy to share them with you if you want some more details. But we have lots of ways to get what we want, and always with de-escalation being the first thing that we're looking to do. And, and then we would, and again, shooting from the hip, but I would think that we would want Loved One there with us so that there's resources even being offered as the vehicle is being hooked up to a tow truck. I mean, I don't think, like I said, I don't think our goal is to leave somebody just standing on the side of the road and now the government has come and left them on the side of the road with their 2 suitcases and now we're off to the next thing. I don't think that that's our intent at all. Obviously, they're adults, and if they tell us they don't want their help, then we can't do anything. But I think we're thinking about all of these things as we're going through this process.
So what about their property? We tow it, does it get dismantled, and is it derelict and it doesn't run, and we have to, or do we have to now store their property? Do they end up in the jail, or do they end up, if they're resistant and not amicable, or do they end up in one of our housing programs? I guess these impacts are important to know once we implement a policy like this.
Sure. So as far as jail, I mean, what we're talking about specifically here today, no one would be going to jail. Now it's certainly possible that once, to Mr. Seco's point, once we do the inventory and we got in there looking for valuables, and we were to find things that were contraband and illegal, that could lead to a charge, or the person could have a warrant once we get their hands on them. Maybe that's why they don't want to come out in the first place, so that could cause them to go to jail. So, I mean, it's certainly possible, but I don't think this alone would not cause someone to go to jail. As far as their property, we have policies and procedures around both towing vehicles and taking people to jail and how we deal with their property. They're given a list of the property that the sheriff's office seized, and they're told how they get that property back, and we have staff that can get that property back to them. The RV itself, there is a way for them to go and retrieve that. It costs money. I don't know in each individual case if they're going to have the means to get that, and then there's a process in which that property then becomes abandoned at some point through the tow company and some of those ordinances. Just to really quickly to touch on deflection, that's also something that I get to be a part of from the sheriff's office perspective. It kind of lines up because it's all kind of touches each other, but again, it's not, I think if we were to get this warrant, we were to go and we were to remove the person, we were to find them to have a deflection amount of drugs, we would do just what we would always do, which is send that report to Mr. Stewart at the DA's office, and he would make a determination whether or not that person was eligible for deflection.
Thank you, and I'm going to let some other commissioners ask their questions. I'm sure we'll have many of them. Commissioner Schull, you're on deck.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Seco, Under Sheriff Ashby. Yeah, my questions, Commissioner West has touched on them, but in the worksheet, it mentions that there's coordination's been done between CSSO, DDT, H3S, and the Attorney's Office. So if a administrative warrant is issued and it's time to tow the vehicle, how do we have a SOP for H3S to deal with the inhabitant? I mean, has this been worked out?
I don't know that we have a specific written procedure in place. We can certainly work on developing some of those to help supplement the ordinance. But what I would say is by the time we're at the warrant stage, the way that this is intended to operate, there would have already been significant outreach efforts.
Okay.
And also, yes, at the time, I mean, again, this will be a planned operation to go out there. We're going to remove the person. We've got to have the tow company there, but also have, whether it be H3S or community partners,
Okay.
having those services available at the time.
Okay. But there's no means to compel the inhabitant to take some sort of transitional housing. I don't like the idea of them standing on the sidewalk as the RV goes rolling down the road. So I wish you luck on that. Also, regarding the RV vehicle itself, where does it get towed to and how is it held? How long before it becomes abandoned? And because most of these folks living in an RV on the side of the road will not have the ability to pay a $40 a day fee to recoup their property. So how is that going to work?
Yeah, so there's state law that sets forth the amount of time that the vehicle needs to be held for, and it can be 15 days if the vehicle has, I think it's less, off the top of my head, I think if it's less than $500 appraised value. If it's something that has more value, I think it's held for 30 days. Don't quote me on those, but I can double check and get you the exact amounts. The personal property within, we would instruct that that be released free of any cost. So people can take whatever they want out of it, and then even while it's being stored, we would make sure that people have the ability to go retrieve personal belongings. Yeah, as far as retrieving the vehicle itself, they're able to do that. There would be costs involved with that.
Okay, and anything that's valuable would be held by the sheriff's office?
Maybe, and we have a mechanism called safekeeping at the sheriff's
Okay.
office, so we can, I mean, just operationally, more likely what we would like to do is get them all their property.
Yeah, okay, good. And one final question. Most of these RVs are not self-contained. I mean, they have property on the sidewalk, on the, area past the sidewalk. It's quite extensive. What is a plan for dealing with all that property once the RV is towed?
Yeah, so personal property, obviously, we would encourage them and give folks every opportunity to take as much or all of their personal property. To the extent that there was property remaining that's not cleaned up or not claimed, then ultimately there's the county has a contract with a local company here that would come along and clean up the site at the end of the applicable time period, which I want to say is around 30 days for storing personal property.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm excited to see this. I think it's going to be a great improvement to the county. Thank you.
I want to take a second and just because I think you're a major part of the conversation, if John, DA Wentworth, and Bill, if you guys want to just come sit up here, and if we have questions for you, we don't have to reach out to the back of the room. I know you're a major part of this policy decision. Feel free to just sit right there. Commissioner Schrader makes up a good point. It might actually be good to have somebody from H3S here, like a Fahid Brown or Adam Brown, just so we get a better understanding, if possible, if they're available.
He's here.
Is he here? Oh, he's
They
back
are
there.
here. They are here.
Hi, Fahid.
So, but maybe if you, if you could come up.
Yeah, if you just want to even pull up a chair and we'll share and we'll get cozy here and get all these voices at the table. Thank you. You're in the back, a little incognito. Awesome. Okay, I think we have everyone here. I'm going to go ahead and call on Commissioner Savas.
Yeah. The introductory language in the packet is focusing on RVs, right? But I read 701.020L. L reads, "No person shall use any vehicle or trailer to camp in or live in while parked upon a county roadway or highway in a residential area, commercial area, or industrial area." So that's what the ordinance says. So the first basic question, does this apply only to RVs?
So the warrant section, which is what we're proposing to amend, the way that it's 7.01090, it's a vehicle or trailer that is being occupied or lived in by a person as their living quarters. The section that you referenced, Commissioner Savas, was something that I think we were actually ready to take out of the code at one point, but we were directed to limit the changes just to this warrant provision for now. So that could be something that we could also address at a future policy session, or even perhaps at your direction now, we could remove that provision.
My iPad just dumped on me. So I can't use that no longer. So I can't look at everything and scroll through there. But I read everything down. I didn't see RV anywhere but the front. Yeah, please, thank you. So I didn't see RV in the language other than in the first 2 pages. So my question is, if it's not spelled out in the latter section, is it, for example, is it a car? Is it a truck with a camper? Is it a truck without a camper? Is it a tent affixed to a car? All those apply? You're nodding your head, okay.
Yes, sir.
So yesterday before us, we had Mr. Johnson, who brought us something that would have closed that one particular road, right? And we would have, I don't know, put a fence around it or gate, whatnot. And I had concerns about that, number one, that being the welfare of the people. And by the way, where do they go? If they're just, this is different, right? But if they're just pushed out of there and it's all fenced, they're going to go somewhere, right? And if this is imposed, and I get it's all well intended, so, you know, I appreciate all the creativity around this, but, and this is maybe more for Vahid, what is it that we need to get them in a better place? How can we really help them so that, let's say their RV's being towed away because it doesn't run, they're illegally parked, and, you know, we know that sometimes this particular road, we've seen the more difficult of the difficult, right? And, but yet maybe no solution. So while part of me says, yeah, we want to fix that problem there at that particular place, I don't want to see it land anywhere else. So to me, it's the person, it's the human being, the human element of that. And so I want to just get a sense of where are they going to go next, because I don't want to just move the problem somewhere else and make it more complex, let alone all the stressors that come along with them no longer having surroundings around them. They could be actually more vulnerable and perhaps more dangerous, either to others or to themselves.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Savis. I think the proposal before you today adds a push tool to a system where we have a lot of pulls, and it would be used at the point where we've been pulling on this household through our contracted outreach providers and through our coordinators for a long time, potentially multiple times, trying to address that question. Where are you going to go? Well, we have resources. We have transitional housing programs. We have housing programs. Can we get you engaged in those things? And if the answer is no, we pull again. This is an opportunity to add a push where the Sheriff's Department and the DA and the judge can say, you can't, no is no longer an answer for you to remain here and occupy this vehicle. So we'll pull again. I mean, that's that opportunity that they're referring to, is we'll come alongside and pull again. We can't, to speak to Commissioner Scholl's observation earlier, we can't compel them to accept our support and our services. And this is adding a tool of push that we hope would, increase our successful outcomes where we have been asking and offering and been receiving a no. Thank you.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. I know that every situation is different. They're not all the same, right? And the reactions and what they do. So let's just say, they just say, okay, I'll leave. I'll turn the key, I'll drive away. And they land up somewhere else. Now, you got enough push to get them to leave, right? But maybe they show up a couple blocks down the road or a couple miles down the road. Obviously, law enforcement, you're somewhat ubiquitous, but not completely, right? You're out there. I guess that's just be a fact of life we'll have to cope with, right? The ones that don't run, right, where they can't just walk away, are probably the most opportune. Hopefully give them a path towards, hey, we can get a room for you or whatnot. So I see you nodding. So that's kind of reassuring. My concern about just closing the road is that it maybe doesn't give them really that lever. You don't have that lever. Just why I'm leaning more towards this. I drive out in that area every week. I was just telling the DA, I drove out there yesterday. It's grown in size again. It's expanded. It just comes in ebbs and flows as far as I don't know if they're the same people. I'm not here to that, but we also have, so I mentioned the cars. It applies to that. So what about the people that pitch a tent in what would otherwise be a parking space? Does this apply to that? I assume not, but I don't know.
The short answer, Commissioner, is this doesn't apply to that. And there are other tools if we needed to relocate campers. In fact, there was just an issue not too long ago where the sheriff's office posted in front of the Clackamas service center because they had some campers that were set up there that were actually impeding other individuals from getting in there and getting the services that they needed, and we were able to clear that out. But automobiles, RVs create a very unique problem in that people can kind of barricade themselves inside in a way that we can't otherwise get to them lawfully without this tool.
Okay, so getting back to this one particular road, I think I counted maybe 7, 8 vehicles there yesterday, probably, and at least maybe a half a dozen tents that are not. So closing the road would solve that problem there, just geographically, not the other piece. So just want to just alert you to that. And I don't know what we need, again, to get there. But I just want to just make this statement. I hear people commonly say it. And again, there's two sides of this, right? The compassion side, trying to help them and whatnot. And that is that these are, they're eyesores to the public, especially the taxpayers, especially when they're in, let's say, a neighborhood, right? And you have a person who maybe has a neighbor that complained, and they have a code enforcement action on a person who pays their taxes, lives in their home, but yet there's someone out in front of the street who's got a pile of pallets and it's a mess, and there's no action being taken on them, but we're taking action on the taxpayer. That's a scenario I've heard a couple times, and so I know we're trying to juggle a lot of things here. We're only focused on this, but I just want to just kind of ask those questions about that. So you are saying, Vahid and Under Sheriff Ashby, that there would be opportunities to come and talk to them several times before we actually just do this. I mean, is there a threshold, or, I mean, how long would it be that you would work with that person before that the vehicle's towed or moved?
Yeah, it's hard to commit to like because as you pointed out, every situation is different. I'd have to rely both on our NLP deputies and the community partners and kind of get a sense from them when we've done about all that we can do. And I think that's kind of a moving target for each person, as you described. Someone could, the first time if we were allowed to do this, the first time that we do this we take an RV, that people might know we're serious, and then when the police come around, they might just move. You know what I mean? We might only do this once.
Right.
So it's hard to say. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to be not answer your question, but I think to assure you is when my folks, I'm in charge of the neighborhood livability people from the sheriff's perspective, and when they come in and they're like, this is the one, we're going to do it. I can assure you that I'm a little bit more like, well, hold on, let's make sure we've checked in with the community partners and One Love, and I want to hear some other people tell me that this is the one, but I just can't give you a number.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll interject quickly and say I just think it's clear that allowing people to subsist this way for this long in our community is not compassionate. So sometimes that push, I love how you said that, Vahid, is ultimately compassion in the long run, even though we are all somewhat uncomfortable with this because of the situations that we find ourselves in. Commissioner Schrader, you are up.
So I guess my question is this, and I do a lot with NACO. Are we aware of National Association of Counties? Are there any other models out there of counties that have implemented this kind of a policy? And do we have a framework for best practices? Because I would assume that some of what we're dealing with in this situation, people who have probably behavioral health problems. And that's where the difficulty will come in terms of danger to the folks who are intervening and danger to the folks who are trying to help. So is there anything available that gives us a roadmap? And I'm looking at Bill because I know that you've worked in this quite a while. So, if you have a situation where someone, really becomes violent and disturbed and disrupted, and you don't want to harm them, and you don't want a deputy or anyone else there to get harmed. And I'm assuming this is a team of people, am I right, Vahid? From housing, behavioral health, law enforcement. So have you got a roadmap of protocols, I guess, is what I'm wondering. Or is it just situational? I mean.
Yeah, I think I'll do my best to answer. So
Sure.
I don't know, as I talk to other law enforcement folks in the metro area mostly, I'm unaware of any other county or city that has an ordinance that would look like this, that would allow the
Okay.
sheriff's office to have this kind of ability to do this. That doesn't mean that they don't. I just have not
No.
heard of one.
Okay.
So as far as like a best practice, I don't know of that. As far as an SOP of what it would look like on the ground, I don't think that we've got that far into the planning stages, because we don't even know if we're going to be allowed to do this. But we don't do anything kind of from the hip when we're talking about these sorts of options. So I can assure you that there will be, and we'll probably learn too. I mean, if I'm being honest, like the first time I did a search warrant, it looks a lot differently than the 10th time I did a search warrant, just because of the learning thing. So we'll learn who the right partners are, and who the right people are, and what the right incentives are, and that'll be a little bit trial by error, and we'll probably create this SOP, and it will probably be a live thing as we work through, what we learn.
Because I see this as the integration again between public, you don't want to put people in jail necessarily, but it's a public safety threat. And how do you integrate the response, again, to continue to be compassionate? And what are the backstops we have in terms of housing and where we're going to put these folks? It sounds like we would probably move them into a jail situation, at least in the immediate, which may be necessary. I understand that, but what's our infrastructure? And would you mind if I did? I would be more than happy to call my contacts at the National Association under the rubric of the public safety folks, and maybe I'll talk to Karen, maybe do a search to see if there's anything like that that's already been implemented. I do think we need to do something, however. I'm not saying we don't. I'm just.
And Commissioner, as far as other programs to model this after, I kind of contained my search to within the state and didn't find anything, because again, laws are different in each state. So I didn't find anything, but if there's other national models out there, certainly I can expand a search, or if you're able to find anything. Administrative warrants in general are not would not be unique here. Those exist all over the place in various contexts. So,
but there may be a county out there, or counties plural, that have used this in a way where it could give us some insights, and that's just would be my only suggestion. And if you want to take a look, that's great. And I have a few people I can call as well. So
that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner, could I respond?
Yeah.
Again, I'm Bill Stewart. I'm with the DA's office. I'm a community prosecutor. We're always very concerned about the public safety issues, particularly folks who are experiencing mental health challenges. The best example I can give you is when we dealt with the Newell Creek Canyon challenges, where we had something close to 60 people camping out in and around that area. And these were folks that had no intention of ever camping on a sidewalk. They were very, very challenged. Our partners at Love One, LEAD, and other groups just spent a ton of time building trust with these folks. And this is very similar. We're not just going to go out for the first time and throw a warrant at somebody.
Okay, got it. Okay. It's going to be
Our partners there work very hard. Our partners at Love One, Father's Heart, and LEAD work very hard to develop trust, so that at a certain point when we're ready to do that, everybody knows it's coming. And they've all talked about plans and how to deal with that, and it helps having that partnership with those outreach folks.
So we may actually be the leaders in the country, actually.
We
don't know. But it wouldn't surprise me, right?
John, I'm curious, DA Wentworth, about how your office, I know how Bill, but also in general now with this new policy, how you intersect with this as a prosecutor, and through that lens. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, because I was just sitting here thinking, of all the folks at the dais here, I'm the least qualified to make a comment, only because this effort is not a criminal effort. And I know
Mike.
people-
Okay.
Oh, turn your mic on. Yep.
Do I have to flip it?
You have to start over too.
Oh, boy.
It should turn green. You just push the button and it should, yep.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right, thanks. My presence here, I'm the least qualified of anybody on this dais to actually make a comment, because this entire effort is intentionally designed to not be part of the criminal justice system.
Okay.
So I know when people see me, they think, oh, jail. That's either a good thing or a bad thing, depending on who you are. But that's not what this is about. And the goal is to deal with a livability issue that is critical to
We
our
are getting the
community.
light. I don't know if they're hearing your mic. Is it on?
Or are you talking close enough to it?
I'm green.
They're green. Can you hear him?
How about now?
Give me a signal that I know that he's okay. Okay, we're good.
Oh,
Thumbs
you can
up.
hear me,
Thank
okay.
you.
I just want to offer this perspective, because Commissioner West, your question right out of the gate was about risk. That I can talk about, and I want to share, because that's a good question, and I get the concern. Whenever you put yourself out there ahead of what others are doing, there's a concern that, are we going too far? The two things that I'm very impressed have been put into place in this process are due process, and by that I mean multiple attempts to work with the person whose issues we're addressing before we even start this process, before we even begin to seek an administrative warrant. That's going to be very attractive to the courts. What did you do before you got to the point when you needed or sought an administrative warrant? The other thing is judicial oversight. That is something that is unique to this. Having a judge, for all our discussion about, well, we'll come up with an SOP that it takes 6 times or 12 times, a judge may say, I want you to do it 15 times, right? That's good for us, because once you have a judge looking at the work and checking and in their legal opinion saying that this is something I'm willing to sign off on, put my name to that administrative warrant, that provides some protection for everyone in terms of showing that we did our due diligence to ensure that a person's rights are protected. I would recommend, and I'm not county council, and I'm, right now we're subject to the Boise decision. I like that for us in this process, in that, as of right now, when you go out to the RV or the vehicle that we're dealing with, you're going to have a place for that person to go.
Okay.
Right? You can't just say, we're going to take your vehicle and leave you at the roadside because there's nowhere to put you. We have to have a place for them to go. If I were making a recommendation, and county council can do whatever they want, even if Boise gets overturned and they say you don't have to do that, that's still probably a pretty good practice, right? Just for our own assurance that we have done everything that we can do to make sure that person has housing. They may decline it, and that's a whole other issue, right? But being able to show that we actually had a spot for that person to go and we didn't just leave them on the roadside would be, I think, just a humanitarian thing to do as the county. So I'm impressed by the thought that's gone into this. I think it's great to have judicial oversight over actions such as this, and I think it's going to provide real dividends to our community and hopefully skirt people from the criminal justice system who otherwise might have to have touches with us that I'd rather have less work than more work. I'm one of the 4 out of 5 dentists who would say, chew sugarless gum and not chew the sugar gum. So put me out of business. I'm okay with that.
Okay. I have a couple thoughts around that. One thing that just keeps coming to my mind that might be an asset that we should maybe tie into the conversation is Commissioner Scholl and I did tour Salvation Army's RV park in Multnomah County, where some of these troubled RVs, and it was right there, right off where I used to call it the RV. Is it Sutherland Road, Commissioner? What was that road?
It's right off Marine Drive.
Marine Drive, and I called it the RV mile, like it was like Welcome to the Thunderdome. It was a thing, and right on the just adjacent from that, the Salvation Army opened up a couple acreage, and they had built up some facilities for people to bring their RVs on. It was fenced off. It was nice. There were bathrooms. There were communal areas. There were some sheltering, and as they were working through this process of whatever that individual's working through that caused them to be in that situation, that place for them to go looked quite reasonable and successful. I don't know what your thoughts are, Commissioner Scholl, but I feel like that this is a tool that we could absolutely use right now if we're going to implement a policy like this.
Well, it would be a good tool. That day that we visited that new RV park up there just off Marine Drive, I think it had spaces for 60 RVs, if I'm not mistaken. But that day there were 4 in there. And as I drove off the site heading home that afternoon, on the radio was a program about those RVs. And one of the TV stations was asking the inhabitants of the RVs there, not in the park, but along the side of the road, why they didn't want to go to this beautiful new park with bathrooms and showers and laundry. The answer was, they have rules there. We don't want to go there. And so your comment about this change to Chapter 7 and Chapter 2 being the push. I think that's going to be very important. So I think this is a really outstanding idea on this administrative warrants changes to Chapter 7 and Chapter 2. So I very much believe that we need to direct staff to bring the proposed amendments before the board for adoption at 2 business meetings less than 13 days apart. Let's get this going.
One other thought, I remember how Mayor Wheeler in Portland jumped up and, this is a little bit different scenario today than we were last year where he was going to, I forget the exact proposal, but he made a big proposal about like putting people in specific homeless camps and sweeping the streets and no public camping allowed. He made kind of this bold kind of move. It ended up not being able to become policy, and there was a lot of debate around that. And it ended up probably not being defensible in that time frame and how he did it. We talked about this a lot, John, privately. Is this defensible? I don't want to get over our skis, but I don't mind being the effective spearhead either. Like they're two different things. And so we have Jane, Ms. Veto, if you want to even come and speak as our county counsel, like, is this defensible for the county? And why is this uniquely a little different than what others are doing?
So yes, I do think this is defensible. It's probably not bulletproof, but it's very defensible. For the statute that regulates how cities and counties can move people, that has to do with sitting and lying on the right of way. And so I actually think this kind of, skirts the issue pretty well because this is a vehicle. And that is not a person lying on the sidewalk. With respect to the Grants Pass case, Grants Pass essentially criminalized homeless behavior. That's not here. So I think that this statute really is artfully crafted to kind of get rid of the legal impediments. I think the policy and the social issues still exist, but it sounds like that's incorporated and part of the overall county plan.
And I just want to piggyback on Commissioner Scholl's comments because when I drove by that, because I was in Portland, my parents lived not far from that area in North Portland, and that's not that far from North Portland where we looked at the RV sites that Salvation Army put up. It filled up. There's a lot in there. So people did end up taking advantage, and there was about 60 spots. Vahid, if we do this policy, we got to avoid whack-a-mole. Bill, you talk about this all the time, Vahid, like, do we have the assets to do what's necessary here, or are we creative on the human side over here to like deal with this? Like maybe would that be an asset? Do we need to look at it?
A program similar to what Commissioner Scholl described?
Yeah, where we visited with Salvation Army where they had kind of a discrete parking area where they provide services and people could temporarily put their RV there because where are we going to house them, right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, there are resources from our carryover spend down plan that we've committed to coming back to the board to discuss your priorities for some of the unallocated dollars that, I think there's a chunk that we're really kind of looking at committing to the recovery ordinance system of care and the recovery center that, is to be determined. But there are resources that could support expansion of safety off the streets programming. We've discussed vehicle campgrounds as one of the modalities for safety off the streets several times before. So it's something that our department is very happy to explore, develop a proposal or a program at your direction. So I think we do have resources that could support that if the board prioritizes it.
And it looks like the Salvation Army created a duplicatable model in that. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that, Vahid. I did want to just share that was a proposal that, I forgot how long ago that you and I both were pushing for, and it went nowhere. We have the resources. It still hasn't gone anywhere. So I think it's just a matter of political will. And I just want to make sure, I'm happy to move and make the motion for option 1 in the interest of time because we have another session coming up. But I do want to make sure that we create a place for these folks to go. And that's a separate conversation. But I think this is not worthwhile unless we have that, right?
Can I interject before you make your motion? Because I like this motion, but if we're going to be holistic in it, I think your motion should include some advancement of the board moving forward with actually talking about doing that with H3S. Like, we've talked about it multiple times in the executive session, we've talked about it here, but now we're passing this policy and we need it, I think, more than ever. I don't know if you can incorporate that in your motion.
Well, how about I do two motions?
Perfect.
This one and a second one. So I move to direct staff to bring the proposed amendments before the board for adoption at 2 business meetings, not less than 13 days apart.
Seconded.
We have a motion from Commissioner Savas to direct staff with option 1, and that is to bring proposed amendments before the board for adoption at 2 business meetings, not less than 13 days apart. We have a second from Commissioner Scholl. Any further discussion on the motion before us?
I just wanted to make a comment that I know what you speak of, Commissioner, because I remember seeing similar things done in Lane County when we visited Lane
And I
County.
think I've taken some of my colleagues and past colleagues to the car camping one
Yep.
over there in Eugene.
It's been very successful.
Terrific. Any further discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, Caroline, will you please take the poll?
Yes. Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Vice Chair West?
Aye, motion passes 4-0. I will also now entertain a motion on the issue of, I don't know how we're going to do this, exploring, creating, moving forward with a similar model that we saw done by Salvation Army on RV camping.
Okay, I move that we direct staff to bring back proposals that include car camping and other options for people that might be displaced as a result of this policy.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Savas on addressing a place to put people that are car RV camping that may be displaced as a result of this proposal. We have a second from Commissioner Schrader. Do we have any further discussion on this motion? I think this is a holistic approach. I hope we're doing good work here. Before we take the vote here, I absolutely want to thank DA Wentworth in your office and your collaborative work with the CCSO. Thank you, Under Sheriff Ashby, our legal team, H3S. We are putting our noggins together and continuing trying to figure out this difficult problem that has been all too persistent in our community. This is really an example of great local government at work. I'm very proud to serve with all of you in this capacity. And with that, I will call the vote.
Okay. Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
Vice Chair West?
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. Good work, everyone. We got another one of these coming right up. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Why don't we take like a 10-minute, 5-minute recess? Do we have time? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I've got to be somewhere.
Okay. Okay, we are now going to resume our policy session after our short recess. And Nancy, what do we have next?
Yes, thank you. So next we have County Opioid Settlement and OFO Award recommendations. And our presenters today are Rod Cook, which is the H3S Director, and Denise Swanson, the Deputy H3S Director. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to you, Rod.
Okay. You ready for me to get going?
Yes, please.
Well, good afternoon, Commissioners. As you are all aware, Clackamas County will receive approximately $24 million in opioid settlement funds over the next 17 years. In order to invest a portion of the funds, we currently have the BCC instructed staff to conduct a notice of funding opportunity for community partners to apply for county opioid settlement funding in coordination with county finance and public and government affairs departments. The BCC also allocated up to $1 million in currently held funds. BCC also had eligible community partner organizations could apply for up to $200,000 per application period and were required to exhibit how their proposal would meet these following criteria. Align with and support the Clackamas County resolution setting forth the framework for a recovery-oriented system of care. Fill an urgent gap or critical need in addressing the issues related to substance use in Clackamas County. Use evidence-based principles as listed in Exhibit E opioid abatement strategies. delivers quality services that provide at least one of the county's priorities of prevention, treatment, recovery, and interventions that support justice-involved individuals, include evaluation metrics such as numbers to be served or impacted, target success rate data, etc. And last, the proposal serves an area of the county that has been disproportionately impacted, such as our rural communities. And so all that was provided inside the notice of funding opportunity that we sent out to the community. We brought that document before this board, and the board approved that document before it went out. The result of that NOFO, or Notice of Funding Opportunity, was 37 submitted proposals totaling over $6.5 million. The county conducted a formal review process and convened a review committee comprised of staff from H3S, county finance, county administration, and an external partner with subject matter expertise evaluated and scored each proposal based on the agreed upon criteria as noted above. From that process, the review committee recommends 6 of the proposals to be awarded, as described in Attachment 1, which funds projects across the continuum and covers all 4 of the BCC priority areas. I have these in detail. I can read each one off to you if you like, if that would be helpful. Or how would
We have them.
those? Okay.
Yeah.
So you have the 6 before you, and I will just note on those that of the 6, 2 are most of them came in, asked for $200,000 for the 2-year period. In 2 cases, we split that, and so we're only on the Northwest Family Services, where they're doing the school work, Tumwater Middle School and Milwaukee High School. We have that at $100,000 is what we're recommending instead of $200,000. And also the 4D recovery project, instead of $200,000, that would be $100,000. And I can repeat that if that's confusing.
Thank you, Rod.
Okay.
I will go with Commissioner Scholl.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cook. So I see that the max allowable was 200K, and why did, when you considered this, decide that 200K for just a few was a better idea than maybe spreading it out to more nonprofits? Because you've got a lot listed here, and a lot of those nonprofits do a lot of good things. Why was it that you?
Yeah, that decision was made on the front end of the NOFO process. And so basically for nonprofits, we wanted to make sure that whatever efforts we invested in, these new investments into the community, you'd spend enough money and enough time so that you can see the fruits of your efforts, so to speak. So usually when we throw small dollars at nonprofits, they do the minimal amounts, and you don't get real results. And so just that's how this NOFO was constructed, assuming up to $100,000 per year over a 2-year period. And so that's why it was written that way.
Okay, and if these recommendations are approved, how soon before the money goes out to the nonprofits?
Our staff behind me there in the back of the room, they've already have the award. If the board approves today, they have the award letters ready to send out.
Okay.
They've already pre-written some of the contract scope of works and those type of things so they can get these out. The idea is we would love these to start July 1. We're at, July, we're mid-July, right? Mid-June now.
Yeah.
So it'll probably start realistically August is we can get these out the door.
Okay, last question is, for those getting, for example, 200K, how long of a period of time do they have to utilize that money?
So they have a 2-year period.
Okay.
Overall. And so, but we'd be looking at the end of year 1, we expect them to be somewhere around that 100,000 mark.
Right, and then you get some sort of a progress report from them at that time?
Yes, we will expect quarterly reports. Those will include numbers served, the metrics in terms of outcomes that they're seeing, and we would be comparing that to any expenditures because we'd get their expenditure report and request for funds
Okay.
to draw down at that point.
All right, good, thank you. That's all my questions.
Commissioner Paul Savas.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that was one of my major questions was how long, what period of time does the dollars apply for? And you just mentioned 2 years or 100,000 a year. The fine print in the packet said they have the 5 years to spend the monies. Is this pay as you go? Oops, now my light's off. My light's back on.
I think we have 5 years, they don't.
Okay, well,
We have 5 years,
Explain
Mr.
that.
Savas, from the time that the dollars come in to us, we have to expend the dollars as they come in every 5 years. So as you know, it's over a 17-year period. So this was why I think one of the reasons that you all made the decision to let's put $1 million out into the community, because we were sitting on, I think, 2.5 million, so.
right. So that was my second question, is that, I guess you're planning on spreading this out over those years to maximize it, to spend it all at once and so on. How long do you think, third question, how long do you think it will take to get results or metrics about the effectiveness of the program and the dollars?
So we will ask for quarterly reports. I think really when you look at nonprofits or the work they're doing with youth, we're going into summer months as well. So if it's any school related, you may have to wait to September to start seeing some real results. But I'd say at 6 months, we can begin to see if they're having any effective, if they're doing any effective work. This is where we look at numbers served, and you begin to look at, now remember we're dealing with drug and alcohol and opioid here, so it's going to depend on what part of the system they're working in. So if you're in recovery, that's a way different measure than if you're speaking to kids and getting them to commit to not using those type of things. So my answer is this: it's going to vary, but you should really begin to see if you're getting a good return on your investment within 6 months of the program starting. At a year, we're really going to know, but we don't want to wait a year on these type of programs because we don't want them failing for 3 months or 9 months and then going after it to terminate contracts. So we would be at 6 months really looking at the data pretty hard.
Okay, and I'm looking at the project program details, and obviously some of these are kids, educational. So is it really easy to get a metric out of that? I mean, I'm just asking because I was a high schooler one time when that program was out, and I'm not sure how effective it was.
Prevention is one of the hardest things to measure, but the types of things you look at are, did you teach the kids, are the kids reporting that they have new skills that you've taught them? And it's a lot of refusal skills, like if a drug dealer approaches them, if their friends are using, if they see somebody who's overdosed or those type of things, has the program taught them those skills? So those are the types of things you're going to measure with youth. And then we have the semi-annual that the state does already for all types of drugs, where they're measuring from a more of a community base or community level. So they're going to be able to tell you of our, I think it's, if I remember right, it's the 11th, 8th, third graders. I forget how low we go, but there's certain grades that they measure the kids at, and you're asking those questions: how many have you used? How many, those type of things. So you have two types of measures we'll be able to use to see the effectiveness on the prevention side.
All right, last question. Whether it's a program area or project program, whatever that may be, however you want to word it, is there an area in which was not addressed or no one really applied for, or was everything covered?
Everything was covered. We were pleasantly surprised, and you have even some newcomers like I think Pear Creek was one of those where they're going to create a mobile crisis unit that's going to go to a lot of the rural areas that no one's covering. So we had some really creative ideas come through this process. Of course, we could only do 6. We had 37. But of the 6, we think we've got the most creative, and they cover the board's priorities and they cover the geography of our county the best. So we've kind of hit 2 birds with 1 stone, and like I said, if there was more, we'd do more. But I think we've picked the cream of the crop, so to speak.
Okay. Well, when ready, I know Commissioner Schrader wants to speak, but I'm happy to make the motion to move this forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Savas. Commissioner Martha Schrader.
Yeah, I just had some questions. There's some folks have not gotten opioid settlement funds, and then other folks have, so we've been supplementing them above and beyond other funds that they've gotten.
Mike.
Commissioner, your mic's not on.
Oh, sorry. I guess I have to repeat that. So what I noticed here is you have 3 different entities, 4D Recovery, Parrot Creek, and CODA, who have they haven't received opioid funds, but Northwest Family Services, and hopefully I'm saying this correctly, Todos Juntos, have before. So this is supplementing programs that they've already proven are successful, or they're adding new programs.
I'm gonna answer it this way because I don't know if they're really supplementing a current program.
Okay.
A lot of this was new programming. So, for instance, Northwest Family Services, they have one program. It's pregnant women. And
Okay.
then they have another program that it's children. So it's totally,
It's just
and they
totally
got
different.
scored as if it was an objective scoring methodology. So that's where you have the opportunity for people. I think what the board and we were concerned about were some who received direct opioid funding from the same source that we do.
Okay.
And we didn't want to have them use our money. Basically, we were trying to avoid supplanting.
Okay.
And so in this case, none of that supplanting is not occurring.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. And I know that out of, how many pages we have of people? Yeah, how many pages we have? We have quite a few people that were wanting to jump in and help tackle this problem, which is a good problem to have. One of these stands out to me a little bit, and I know you guys went through a very long process and difficult process to pick the ones you recommended. So, but I just have a question about one that I think stands out to me that could be a real great asset, because I love how they work to unify within the family, within the youth and the parent, and give parents the resources they need so they don't feel helpless in this situation. And all too often, I feel like personally in our public policy, we don't include parents, and the parents almost sometimes feel usurped or unable or capable through policy to actually help their child in a variety of different issues in the state of Oregon. Song for Charlie sounds like that's exactly what they do, is that they directly want to deal with working with parents to help prevent specifically suicides, which are a chronic and persistent skyrocketing issue right now, especially among young men, and its intersection with fentanyl and drug usage. And at that very basic, important level of governance within civil society is the family, and strengthening the family and giving them the resources they need. It seems like they all seem noble. Like, I'm not trying to parse this out, but I also think that, like, we get most bang for a buck right now in treatment and prevention, specifically within these dollars. We are right. I could totally tell, yeah, this is probably the direction that the board would, you guys did a great job of that, like interpreting our direction and make it align to that. Can you speak maybe to like why, maybe that's too specific and there's like 37 of them here.
Yeah.
And I know that probably some of these are like, oh, it wasn't easy, but we had to make a call. There's so many resources and this is what we have to do. That one just for some reason specifically stands out to me. You may know more about Song for Charlie than I do.
And again, it was a panel of scores, and so I'm looking at their score, and they're in the 73.86 range. So it wasn't that people felt like it wasn't a good program. It was just other programs did more. So it's just the competition. On any other given day, they would have won the day. But they're just competing against some other efforts that make more of a dent in this issue than them at this point. We asked Elizabeth in finance to be here because there's other. This is the process we use, and I don't know how we get outside of it, but the board may have other ways that they can look at assisting nonprofits who've come forward and asked for monies. So there may be other options that not necessarily through this particular process, but there may be other options. So again, they scored 73.86, which means they did pretty well. It's just that in our top 6, they're all above that.
Okay. Just my last question, can you speak to the methodology and the scoring process and how you guys tried to be objective and do that while fitting within the board priorities?
Yes, we had scoring criteria, a lot of it based on where the board had asked us to take a look at this, so geography. What part of the system is it, addressing? Is it prevention? Is it intervention? Is it recovery? And I think there's one more category. And then the scales were, have they really answered the questions definitively? Are we having to guess what they might do, or is it really clear? I remember certain ones like Pear Creek were intriguing because of the amount of geography that it was covering and the type of geography. It was all in rural, and nobody else was really going in those directions. So those type of things were the things that I think swayed us, because we try to be as objective as possible. Whenever you have human beings, there's subjectivity they bring to the table. But I think for the most part, and then so the process was we all did our scores individually. We come together, we average it out. If you have any outliers, we have those panel members talk about that. How did you get there? Some people will change their scores at that point to become more like the other scores that they've seen. We didn't have a lot of that happen. And then we look at our results and say, okay, what do you guys feel about the number one? How do you feel about number two? And that's where we got down to those last few and said, both of these are kind of equal weight here. So maybe we only offer them $100,000 overall as opposed to the $200,000. So that's where we got to that split on that one. So that shows some of the deeper conversations that occurred.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Scholl.
Yes, thank you. It's overwhelming, the degree of this problem of drugs coming in contact with our most precious people, our kids, our young people, our grade school students even. Yesterday morning on the way in, I heard a report, nationwide report on the kind of drugs that are showing up in our schools, K-12 schools in America. And I just cannot tell you how upsetting it is. So I noticed amongst the 6 recommended recipients, a couple of them, Northwest Family Services, specifically reference a couple of schools, Tumwater Middle School, Milwaukee High School, and then another one, Todos Juntos, talks about Estacada Middle School. My question is, do the other 4 have some sort of contact with the school district they're in to help coordinate and learn about what the situation really is in the schools?
Not necessarily specifically stated in their application, but I can tell you the staff that are overseeing this process are the ones who are going to, throughout the year, try to connect the dots. Because if you're going to be in a community and you're going to touch the community, whether it be parents or children, you have to access the schools. So where the staff back there in the back of the room, they're the ones who are connecting law enforcement, school districts, and doing all the connecting pieces. And that's what we can negotiate as we're writing out their contracts. We can make sure those extra steps. Because remember, because of the board and the recovery system, we're trying to build a system. So even though you were talking to law enforcement earlier and the deflection and all the other stuff we're doing, and every step of the way we do that because that's how the funding came in, but then we're trying to connect the dots because the more we can get case managers who can talk about the whole system, whether it be a parent or a child or a user, non-user, that's what's going to make the difference in terms of our ability to reach success. So we're right there with you on that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I don't see any further questions here. I will, at this time, we've been here, we've been doing this a long time today, so I think it's time. I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve option 1, approve county opioid settlement funding recommendations as presented.
Second?
Thank you. Commissioner Savas made a motion that has been seconded by Commissioner Schrader. The motion was to approve option 1, which is to approve the county opioid settlement funding recommendations as presented. Do we have any further discussion on this?
I'll just say for everybody in the room and people out there who hear this, I really appreciate your passion and concern for our young people, especially. We have to win this battle, and I know many of you go home very tired, maybe sometimes a little bit discouraged at the scope of the problem, but please do not give up. And I pray to God that someday we'll come back here in this room and we can report that we don't have any child in this county or in this state or in this nation being affected by these horrible, horrible opioids. Thank you again for your work.
Thank you for your words, Commissioner Schull. I will call the vote.
Okay, Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Vice Chair West.
Aye, motion passes 4-0. Good work.
And can I say before we leave, it's because of your vision that we're able to do this, and I think it's because of what you've put out into the atmosphere that you have so many responses. People are really trying to look at how to deal with this crisis, and in large part it's because of your leadership. So we appreciate you supporting this and moving this forward.
Oh, great, thank you. Thank you so much. With that, we are adjourned, and everybody have a great afternoon and enjoy some of that great Oregon sunshine. With that, we're adjourned.